The day I started thinking about this service, I felt like a social outcast. There's nothing like telling others that you've come into contact with someone who's tested positive for COVID to give you an introverted time. I felt it only right to let those know I would be seeing that week that this had happened, and they would have the choice as to whether they wanted to be with me or not. The result of offering this choice is that no one wanted to be with me. This gave me the chance to prayerfully work my way through the services for October. And when I got to today, I wanted to follow on from one of the points I made last week, that we have a good news story. This is what Paul had told those in Lystra when the lame man was healed. And Paul must have felt like a celebrity who just wanted to get out of there. But he didn't. He said, "We are bringing you good news." And he went on to explain that to them. This morning, though, we have an account not just of one leper, but of four. They were not so much the fab four, but the foul four, for no one would want to go anywhere near them. A bit like me, the day I started to write this. Picture the scene. Four desperate men with nothing to lose. They went to the camp not to see what they could find, but to surrender, to just give up. But when they got there, there's no one to surrender to. And that wasn't just lucky, it was the Lord. For humanly speaking, there would always have been someone there. The Arameans were camping, but they weren't on holiday. And when they left, it wasn't for a day out, it was for a way out, because the Lord had put fear into their hearts. It tells us in verse 7 of 2 Kings chapter 7 that they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. What happens next would almost be comic if it wasn't so serious. Our furtive four reach the camp, find some food and drink, and take it. They go back and find riches, silver, gold, and clothing, and go off and hide them. And then they come back a third time and find some more stuff in another tent. Now, let's just press the pause button. Not literally, but the next time you find yourself in a campsite, this verse is not an invitation to take whatever you want for an empty tent. That's stealing. And it could be argued that that's exactly what they were doing. If you look at the next thing they say, maybe they've got a guilty conscience, for it's what we are doing is not right. But it's not the fact that they're taking what they are that they say isn't right. It's that they're keeping it to themselves. Key line coming up from these lepers. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. And it's this that I want us to think about for the next few minutes. What the good news is that we have and how we can share that with others. We might feel like lepers, but look what we have. Firstly, we have the refreshments. Just as our four ate and drank from what they found, we have something to hold us up, the Bible. It says in Psalm 19 and verse 7, the law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. It goes on to say that God's laws are sweeter than honey. And in the longest psalm of all, Psalm 119, it says, how sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. Just think about the meaning of the word refreshments. What picture does it sum up? A rota? A question in these times to refresh or not to refresh? That is the question. But the clue is in the name. The whole point of refreshments is that they are supposed to refresh you. And after listening to this for the next couple of hours, you'll probably need them. Our four were hungry. They were desperate. They knew their need for what they found. This was good news for them. And then they realized it was good news for everyone and that they were the ones to share it. Now, we are not in a famine. We don't know the meaning of the word in this country. We may have a shortage of turkeys for Christmas, but dare I say it, other meats are available. But if you found a source of turkeys that no one else knew about, what would you do? You might not go and tell everyone, but you would at least tell others who that you knew, because you want them to have some too, unless they were vegetarian. If you're a Christian listening to this, you may or may not be having turkey when Christmas comes round. But you found the meaning of Christmas, and that is good news for sharing. People are hungry for good news. They've had more than their fill of bad news. It's time for them to be refreshed, and we have what is needed. Fast forward to the time of Jesus. He was walking between Judea and Galilee. I Googled how long the walk from Jerusalem to Galilee would be, and it said, depending on what part of Galilee you're walking to, up to 200 kilometers. You know the next thing I Googled, don't you? That's 124 miles. A bit like walking from Leicester to South London. You'd have to wait for even longer for a bus than you do now. And a poor man such as Jesus would have only had the cheapest option, on foot. So you can understand why he's tired when he sits down by a well at midday. And the temperature as well would have been a factor in that. So he's sitting there in the heat of the day, and then enter stage left a woman who's coming to draw water from the well. You didn't just come and get your water at that time of the day because it was way too hot, but she did because no one liked her. She'd done some bad things, but it would have been too awkward to have gone when others were there. When Jesus, a Jewish man, asks her, a Samaritan woman, for a drink, it really is a bit awkward. But what follows is a life-changing encounter for this woman. He offers her living water, not because she had been by a well, but because for her own well-being. Indeed, more than that, this would be a life-changing relationship with the living God that would satisfy forever. And we, if we belong to Jesus, can offer that same refreshing relationship with him because of what the Lord has done for us too. Let's look at the second thing our four found. They took silver, gold, and clothes and went off and hid them. Again, these things, always valuable, would have taken on an even greater worth in their time. And in our own day, and this is our second point, if we know the Lord, we have the riches of a relationship with a refreshing, life-changing God. And it's good to pass that on too, that others may benefit. This is good news. Let's not keep it to ourselves. If we're Christians listening to this, we can pray. Of course, anyone can pray, but if we've known the value of talking to the Lord over maybe a number of years, that's good news to share. All of us have had answers to prayer, maybe in some cases, miraculous ones. In his book, Sit, Walk, Stand, Watchman Nee describes a preaching mission to an island off the South China coast. There were 7 of them in the group, including a 16-year-old new convert whom he calls Brother Wu. The island was fairly large, containing about 6,000 homes. Preaching seemed quite fruitless on the island, and Nee discovered it was because of the dedication of the people there to an idol they called Tawang. They were convinced of his power because on the day of his festival and parade each year, the weather was always near perfect. When is the procession this year? Young Wu asked a group that had gathered to hear them preach. It is fixed for January the 11th at 8 in the morning, was the reply. Then, said the new convert, I promise you that it will certainly rain on the 11th. At that, there was an outburst of cries from the crowd. That's enough. We don't want to hear any more of your preaching. If there is rain on the 11th, then your God is God. Watchman Nee had been elsewhere in the village when this confrontation had taken place. Upon being informed about it, he saw that the situation was serious and called the group to prayer. On the morning of the 11th, there was not a cloud in the sky, but during grace for breakfast, sprinkles began to fall, and these were followed by heavy rain. Worshippers of the idol Tawang were so upset that they placed it in a sedan chair and carried it outdoors, hoping this would stop the rain. Then the rain increased. After only a short distance, the carriers of the idol stumbled and fell, dropping the idol and fracturing its jaw and left arm. A number of young people turned to Christ as a result of the rain coming in answer to prayer. But the elders of the village made divination and said that the wrong day had been chosen. The proper day of the procession, they said, should have been the 14th. When Nee and his friends heard this, they again went to prayer, asking for rain on the 14th and for clear days for preaching until then. That afternoon, the sky cleared, and on the good days that followed, there were 30 converts. Of the crucial test day, Nee says, the 14th broke, another perfect day, and we had good meetings. As the evening approached, we met again at the appointed hour. We quietly brought the matter to the Lord's remembrance. Not a minute late, his answer came with torrential rain and floods as before. The power of the idol over the islanders was broken. The enemy was defeated. Believing prayer had brought a great victory. Conversions followed, and the impact upon the servants of God who had witnessed the power of him would continue to enrich their Christian service from that time on. And there's nothing like answered prayer as riches in our own Christian experience. If you've had an answer to prayer recently, pass on that good news to someone else. It's part of your good news story, and telling it will do you both good. And I know this is a cliched question, but if someone does ask you what you did at the weekend, why not tell them you listened to this? That is also very enriching and good to pass that on too. Well, we've seen what our 4 lepers found in that deserted campsite: refreshments and riches. Back in verse 8, it says they found other things and took those too. It doesn't say what they were, but presumably they were of some use. And whatever items they found, it was then that they said those words, "This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves." So lastly, I would say, we have the rest. We have the rest in more ways than one. If we're Christians, we have so much. Knowing that God is with us in our everyday lives. The power of his Holy Spirit to help us live for him, and all the rest, quite literally, that comes with knowing the Lord. Let's not keep it to ourselves. We have a global pandemic, not just of physical health, but of mental health as well. People are crying out for rest, not just in body, but in mind. And Christians are not immune from that. According to the Global Wellness Institute, the global health and wellness industry is now worth $4.2 trillion, which shows the demand for their services. But God's people have something that is priceless. The good news for sharing is that if we know the Lord, he is with us in whatever we are facing, whether it's at school or at work or in the home or on the roads or wherever else it may be. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This is such good news, and I share it with you and encourage you to pass it on. It's never been as easy in one sense to share good news. You only have to go on Facebook, as lots of people my age do, to see good news shared, sometimes about children who'd rather you didn't. Other posts can be, "Look at me," and that's okay, but I would encourage you in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ to say, "Look at him. For God so loved the world, he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but will have everlasting life." That is good news for sharing. If you know it, then I encourage you to share the refreshing love of the Lord, the riches of being his follower, and the rest in every sense that you have discovered. This has been good news for you, and it still is. And if you're not sure you know this good news, why not ask someone who does and ask them to share it with you? You may feel like a leper, but the Lord knows you're a learner when it comes to sharing this good news, and he will be alongside you in all your sharing. This is good news. Let's not keep it to ourselves.